Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Construction Record. This is episode 101 in the year 2020, and we're going to be celebrating the wrap-up of this crazy year with our Year in Review podcast. And I've assembled the great crack news national team of the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce for this podcast. So joining me today is Lindsey Cole, DCN-JOC editor.
Hello.
Angela Gismondi, staff writer with the DCN.
Hey.
Russel Hixson, staff writer with the Journal of Commerce.
Hello.
Don Wall, staff writer with the DCN.
Howdy.
And the other voice that you're very familiar with if you listen to this podcast a lot, our digital media editor and co-host of the Construction Record podcast, Warren Frey.
Hello.
Folks, thank you so much for getting together today so we can give our listeners and our readers who give a listen to us hear our thoughts, I guess, on the stories behind the stories of this crazy year of 2021. I guess it's not an exaggeration to call it crazy, based on what we've seen, right?
I think it's mild. I think that's mild, actually.
Right. So, what I thought would be a benefit for everyone, because I think back to the year in review we did last year in our stories, and obviously no one ever really has a global pandemic on the horizon as things that could impact your stories and your editorial strategic planning in the year ahead. But it did happen. But we didn't start out the year focused on COVID at all. For a couple of months, it was all business as usual, BAU, as they say. And I think maybe that's kind of one of the areas I wanted to start off with. And anybody jump in on this. But the first question I would put to you all is, what issue or trend or topic were you curious about or looking forward to covering this year in 2020 before COVID-19 erupted and took over all our lives? Feel free to jump in, whoever wants to jump in.
I can jump in first. We were going to go down to Vegas and cover Con Expo. That in and of itself would have been cool. But I mostly was looking forward to seeing all the new technology, which at something like that, you'll see that robot that Boston Dynamics created. I wanted to see all that stuff so I could write a whole bunch of stories and do a bunch of videos about all the crazy tech that I would actually have in front of me for once, as opposed to just hearing about it. And that obviously did not happen. Instead, I know my webcam intimately.
Don't we?
Well, Vince,
Yeah.
what I was interested in at the start of the year, truly, there was a lot of infrastructure money that was going to be spent on major transit projects at the start of the year. So we were looking ahead for Go RER electrification. So that was going to be, in the tens of billions of dollars. So, you're thinking of what's really going to impact the construction sector in Ontario. So that's, so it was going to be in three phases. I think one thing that's notable about this year is the absence of any kind of discussion on that. Like, does the case study, the business case that they made for it still hold? In the meantime, everybody, there's been a lot of emphasis on saying all the subways in Toronto, the 28 billion being spent on those subways is still coming along stream. Hardly anything said about Go RER project. I just looked it up and they say, okay, procurement for that, 4 teams bidding to the RFP process. So that's something that was kind of missing in action this year.
That was something you're looking forward to, Don. That was that kind of rollout of that infrastructure funding. Right, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll go around the horn here still. So whoever wants to jump in, go ahead.
I kind of bring a little bit of a different perspective, given that I was sitting on my couch enjoying my little one at the time. So when I came back from mat leave, obviously it was a completely different climate than I had anticipated. However, when I was kind of watching the DCN website stories fly and stuff when I was off, I was looking forward to coming back and kind of seeing how some things evolved while I was off, including on the Western Front community benefits agreements, which ironically still played out in 2020. So
Yes.
it's kind of cool to still see that transpire, but albeit a very different climate. On the DCN side, as Don kind of alluded to, there were some major projects that when I left that were kind of just little tricklings of an idea, and then they started to become more tangible as I saw the year unfold. And then all of a sudden there's just like, well, no. So it's just kind of interesting to see how much the pandemic truly changed things.
Russell Ranch? Go ahead.
I was looking forward to the Fitzpatrick trial, albeit that's a specific one. And I think with what we saw in the past few days with workers dying, I know you guys had some horrible incidents in Toronto. We had a horrible incident in Calgary. Construction is a dangerous industry. And we were going to have a trial in November about a worker that was killed on a site, a criminal trial. And that's been delayed until 2021. And I thought that was going to be really, really interesting. And I think the courts got really messed up because of COVID. It's difficult. They had to figure out how they're going to do that. So that delayed things. And then there was also an extradition issue with that case. But I was really looking forward because I thought that could be a really important thing for holding employers accountable for what happens to workers. So we'll have to wait a year to see what happens there now.
Sure. Thanks, Russ. How about you, Ange?
So for me, it was a mental health, the mental health issue. I don't remember if it was at the end of last year or the beginning of this year, but Vince, you tasked us with coming up with an individual project or series for the year for 2020. And I had kind of gotten the ball rolling on that, and I started reaching out to people like organizations like Threads of Life, and they had actually gotten me in touch with some of the families of workers who had lost their lives to either mental illness, drug addiction, or suicide, which has been a big problem in the industry for years. And I wanted to do kind of a deeper dive and speak to their families. And it's, I mean, you know, mental health is obviously still a huge issue right now. Actually, one of the first stories I did when COVID hit was mental health, but it's just taken kind of a different path for me. So I'm still doing those kind of stories, but just in a different way.
See, I find it interesting. Right now, as we record this podcast, we have our polls up, you know, on LinkedIn and Twitter for the DCN and JOC. And we're asking, you know, our followers, COVID aside, you know, which of these 4 topics is the one that had the biggest impact in construction? And I think about even myself when I'm planning ahead for this year, because we were going to have that handoff between Lindsey and I as she came back from mat leave. And looking and listening to you folks, there's one issue that's on that poll, on those polls, that percolated during the COVID crisis, during the pandemic, and that has to do with racism in construction. You know, not that it's something new. It's not like we discovered now that there's racism in our industry, but the way the issue percolated in the middle of that social furor in the States with Black Lives Matter and everything else happening, it was interesting to watch our industry kind of respond to that. And it wasn't on the map. You know, I think back to answering the question that I posed to all of you is like CBAs was one of the things I was curious to see how that was going to play out. Mental health, that was a big thing at the back end of 2019, especially in the fall during the conferences. Mental health in the industry tools, you know, to deal with it. So maybe it was a kind of an interesting harbinger, or like an omen in a way, right? But at least the industry started that conversation on how you deal with mental health for your workers, because certainly COVID has been a stressful time. We're not immune to it as well as our news team and our company, right? Mental health wise, it's been a tangible issue to tackle, right? So very interesting. How about so then you got COVID and it comes out March 14th, you know, everything starts to kind of slowly start falling apart here in Canada. You know what I mean? Our way of life starts to change. And I'll put it out there, whoever wants to answer first, but it's been about 9 months now, 10 months of this. What has surprised you about how construction has dealt with the COVID-19 crisis?
I would say how quickly they responded, given how slow at least they have a reputation for being slow to change. They changed pretty quickly, although they had to change less than others, I guess. So, but still, the turnaround was pretty impressive.
What do you mean by change? What
I mean, in terms of safety on the site and having to just basically adapt to this thing. Like, nobody knew what was going on. They're like, well, we're just going to have to do this, that, and the other thing to adapt to it. And they mostly did after they were declared essential. And in Ontario, it was a little different because some of it was and some of it wasn't, but they had a little more time. But they did adapt and mostly succeeded, from what I can tell.
Yeah. You know, Vince, what struck me, you know, I noticed, so the League of Champions got going. That's an association that deals with health and safety. So all of a sudden they're having to pull together their programming, and they're asking people, how do we lead our sector through this? So they have a few of the sessions had different, dealing with different issues, but so leaders had to lead, to quote a notable person in Ontario. So they're so they really had to decide, there's no script for this, no playbook to work by. So they had to say, okay, what do we do? How do we change our whole way of organizing our meetings and dealing with staff, drawing up new plans again, as I say, no playbook for any of that, putting things together, holding regular meetings, meeting with our staff, holding staff meetings. And also, one other point that I've noticed. Well, yeah, so some of these the stakeholders and the leaders of associations, they're having to deal with issues that are broader beyond the sector. Sometimes they advocate for their sector. Construction sector wants this, and other sectors may want something that's opposed. But anyway, we're representing our members. But here they're asking, okay, who gets PPE first? Who gets the vaccines first? So people are taking kind of a statesman-like position and saying, it's so unlike maybe in other times, we want the face masks first because we got to keep working. No, they're taking broader points of view. So it's kind of interesting to watch people how that played out.
I actually think it's interesting to that COVID brought to the forefront some things that I think would be obvious sanitation practices that actually hadn't been happening, and the stringent protocols that were put in place as a result of that. So to me, and we've done several stories on it, and I know everyone who's listening can probably relate to this, but the bathroom facilities on a construction site are less than glamorous, and that's fine. I don't think anybody's expecting the Ritz, but at the same point, now that this is in play, it's completely changed site practices, cleaning, and I hope it sticks around, despite whether a pandemic is happening or not. Just for, I think, to go along with the mental health aspect of things, I think some construction workers kind of deserve to have a little bit better site sanitation facilities. So that's kind of where I saw some notable changes.
I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to say that I actually was surprised that there weren't more cases on construction sites in Ontario. I can't speak for the rest of Canada, but looking at the big picture there, it was pretty good, and that's like the other people said. It's people been contractors and project managers have been stepping up and taking extra safety protocols and social distancing on sites and that kind of stuff. So that's when I talked to them, right after COVID hit, it was kind of, they all said, like Lindsey said, it's something that they should have been doing all along, these increased sanitation protocols and stuff like that. So they're just, and same with the digital stuff. They're, moving to digital quicker than they were before. And that's, again, because, COVID kind of accelerated everything. So it was going that way, in a year or two, they would tell me, but because of COVID, we did it quicker. So it's just something that I've heard.
Perfect. Thank you. Hey, Russ, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, Angela just touched on what I was going to say is, construction is notorious for being a very slow dinosaur industry when it comes to adopting new things and changing. And I was shocked at how quickly they were able to integrate new technology and do paperless things and do video conferencing. All these things I thought would be more of a difficult thing, because we all have been to conferences where people talk a lot about, oh, we want to be more techie, and then it's just a lot of talk and it takes forever. But just within a few weeks, we had a lot of these people, they just switched over so quickly, and I was very impressed.
I was thinking back to our first few podcasts we had recorded when everything was just unsettled, right? We had breaking news. It felt like almost every late afternoon here in Ontario, breaking news in BC. And we would record our podcast. And I think back to a couple podcasts Warren, Russ, and I recorded. And we were talking about that wave, the shock and awe factor of the beginning of COVID taking place, and all of us figuring out what to do in our personal lives, let alone professionally. Yeah, the shell shock. And then with each, then that so happened that our podcast started to go weekly because the demand started to increase. A little bit of, and we've been trying to explore this of late. It was that here we go with the dinosaur kind of industry, but people started listening to us that never did before. And what was the reason why? You try to ask the question. They were latching on to something that they could identify with because they weren't working. Or B, they wanted the latest intel, whatever intel they could get from wherever, because they were pressed with having to make decisions. And I remember in some of those conversations, sorry for the preamble, but this industry is true. Yeah, notoriously, we've all written the stories. Everybody on the screen has written the stories about how construction is late to the game on technology and innovation. At the same time, I think about the people on the screen and we think about the people we've spoken to. We know that in this industry and in a construction site, they can gerrymander and change things on the fly to make it happen. Right, at a physical point of view, like they'll sit back and deconstruct an issue they're having on site and find a solution of some kind, right, to a building problem. So, but that's on the ground level. I always thought about that. That's like at the kind of the ground level, the site soup, you know what I mean, and the workers talking. But to see the kind of executive branch of construction start to finally push that envelope, people we never thought we could ever get on a Zoom call. Speaking at it from our point of view, right?
Mhm.
But I think it's on point. It's interesting to see how they kind of saw it. And I found too the requests we were getting to be on the podcast were an indication of some kind of change happening in the industry. All of a sudden, the people that were changers, trying to bring change to the industry, felt confident enough to talk about the change a bit more. You know, people advocating to hit the reset button around the manufacturing and supply chains. Now's the time to go domestic, stop, kind of the anti-globalization kind of movement. And then just going paperless. Just going paperless. People all of a sudden starting to rely on, just going to digital and social media to share information. I thought that that's what surprised me. But it was out of necessity, right? Necessity is the motherhood of a lot of things, right?
Yep.
And it seemed to push the construction industry that way. So I found that interesting. So here we are at the back end of the year. We got to look ahead. I know in our kind of our green room chat with you guys before, one of the questions I said I was going to pose to you all is, okay, looking ahead to 2021, what issue or topic besides COVID are you interested in following through and seeing how it plays out? But I think I have to add another question, is that now that the first vaccine started rolling out yesterday, what in your minds does that present as far as questions that the construction industry needs to tackle or deal with, or does it? Does it present issues? Do we have to look at construction sites, or construction is going to be requiring vaccinations of people before they can come on, like things like that? So I'll open up the door first to anybody who wants to talk about what they're looking forward to in 2021 as far as covering it topic-wise.
I would say, and I've said this before about other when we've talked about virtual conferences we've gone to. Now that they've adopted all this stuff, do they ever go back to meeting in some place to talk about this stuff and pay lip service to technology? They don't have to anymore. They've already done it. So are they going to bother? Is this going to be the way? And is that going to mean they get things done quicker because they're doing it just virtually and they're drawing from a larger pool than they could before, or doesn't it? Or does everybody just kind of go back to the way things were because we can? I don't know what the answer is, but it'd be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know what, Vince? I started off, I talked earlier about billions being spent. So now there's really going to be billions spent this year. So once, speaking of the vaccine, and so Minister Freeland is saying, once we get the COVID under control mid-year, that's when they're going to unveil, all those billions, 75 billion to 100 billion over 3 years. So that's $33 billion to be spent possibly, as of July. There'll be lots of hands out for that. So it'll be interesting to see the way that's being spent. And that's on top of, the 20 or the 10 billion handed to the green infrastructure, or the CIB, Canada Infrastructure Bank. Will they finally get some traction at that bank? They're handed this, they didn't show tremendous amount of competence. They never got they never really got going the way everyone hoped they would. But now they've got this platform. It's all green building projects. Tons of money for retrofits, which originally we used to think, okay, the green building sector is all going to be these wonderful projects with flying solar panels on the roof and wings, but now it's just going to be tons of retrofits, all the money going there. All those old stock of buildings are going to be redone. So it's maybe not spectacular, beautiful buildings, but lots of money in there. So anyway, once again, tens of billions of dollars to be spent, and it'll be interesting to see if that rolls out and and helps kickstart the economy out of the the way we need it to happen.
Perfect. Thank you, Don.
I think touching on that, Don, is the balance between, economic prosperity or recovery, I suppose is a better term, and the human side of things with a vaccination rollout. And I think that goes generally, not just for construction too. But to me, that's a good question, Vince, about the vaccination rollout and how it impacts construction. There has been some buzz. Don just did a story, as he alluded to earlier, I believe, with regards to who should construction workers kind of be bumped up the list when it comes to, because they are considered an essential service. Should they be bumped up the list or shouldn't they? I'm not going to decide that, but I mean, it's definitely something that's being debated and discussed. I think that what the government has been saying here in Ontario, and I think across the country as well, yes, this vaccine is absolutely a ray of hope and a ray of light, but this doesn't change what has currently happened. And I think protocols have to stay the same regardless going forward. And then I think there's also a changing landscape for the construction industry when it comes to future projects. And I think I'm interested to see, yes, we have some big players going to be doing some bigger projects. But as Don said, there's some little things that need to be done. And I think there's been a lot of discussion, too, about the small and medium-sized guys. What do they do? What's going on? What's going to happen with them? Is there a recovery slated for those guys who've taken a major hit? I don't know. So for me, I'm interested to see how that pans out, maybe for the little guy.
That's what I was going to say as well. I'm, I guess, focused on the pipeline of projects because a lot of people talk about, going into this year, there was huge pipeline of projects. With, of course, COVID hit, changed everything. And now people are concerned that what they're working on now is kind of a delay from earlier in the year, and they're worried about, they're not going to have work next year. And going off of what Don said, the government funding as well, is it going to be there, or, has it all gone to COVID recovery efforts? And are they going to be cutting back on infrastructure funding in the new year? And what is that going to mean for the smaller businesses, or even the larger businesses, if they don't have those big infrastructure projects to do, if more projects get canceled and stuff like that? So that's what I'm interested in going forward.
Cool. What about you, Russ?
Yeah, I got two things. On the vaccine question, I'm fascinated to see if they have certain critical healthcare projects or defense projects or, massive economic boom projects where they just designate them, this is critical to our national security, to our country, and we have to have people on there vaccinated. Whereas, maybe, a high rise, apartment building, they're like, that's not a critical thing. Maybe they triage it like that. I don't know. Because there's not going to be, widely available vaccine probably for a little while. So that's something that I'm curious about, because I think there's definitely going to be some projects where the government is going to be having discussions like, this is a crucial thing, like as important as, maybe like if it's a hospital or something. So I'm curious to see how that happens. And in terms of like looking to 2021, I think I'm going to echo some of the things that what other people are saying. But we've had like a massive global mental trauma. Like everyone is going to have this kind of PTSD going forward. And while there were a lot of projects that were already being built when the pandemic hit, I'm fascinated to see, because every municipality, city, project owner, developer is sitting down right now thinking, okay, what do we build next? Because that's probably completely changed. In terms of like, like a city or the government, they're like, usually you just go, oh, let's build bridges, let's build roads, let's build, this or that. Do we add certain things to that infrastructure, like data centers, like, different things like that? From a developer standpoint, do you stop building office space? Do you change the kind of office space that you're building? Because human behavior is going to be different now, and you have to design for that. Because I don't know, I walk around and if someone goes to shake my hand or give me a hug, I get like this twinge, it scares me. And I think that's not going to go away right away once people start getting vaccinated. People are going to have this collective cultural trauma around this that it's going to take them a while to. There's been like a mental reset, I think, and the way people behave determines, the way we build things. So I'm really fascinated to see the kind of projects that people decide to build after this.
Just
like kind
to
of
add to
picking
that.
up.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Warren. No, go ahead.
Just to add to that, I'm already seeing budgets being released for 2021 for cities, who are the ones who are going to get stuck with the bill anyway, saying, well, we're going to have less services now because we spent all this money already. So that's going to affect construction or lack thereof as well.
People use transit way less because they're traumatized. They don't want to be in a bus full of people, maybe.
But then the other
thing
work from
home.
Exactly. But then you have this whole thing of people moving to get bigger spaces so they can work from home. But also these, like I'm looking at them right now, these office buildings aren't going anywhere. So what are they going to do with them? They're going to do something with them. They're not going to tear them down.
Well, there's been talk about potentially making them into affordable housing if they
can.
Exactly,
which in Vancouver specifically would be a great idea.
That's already happening in Alberta. I just wrote about they had a hotel. No one's staying in hotels.
That's
so
right.
they turned it into seniors housing. So I think, you're right. We might see a lot of repurposing.
I see a kind of convergence, picking up on that, the reset that you mentioned. Conversions of, there's been this other crisis that's been happening in our lifetime. Not to sound like the big tree hugger, but I'm a believer of science. You know what I mean? Climate change. And this industry's been tasked. Every one of you I know have been at a conference, and I've been at them as well, where there's some sort of green building session, forum, speaker, right? And it's always been one of these things on the side here, right? You know, some of these conferences, if we have them anymore, that goes to Warren's point earlier too, right? Like, are people really going to be missing their networking, in-person networking as they did before, or really that networking on the 18 holes of golf near a beach somewhere, you know? Are they going to miss those little getaways? I'm being cynical, but I'm a journalist, so I don't mind. You know, but back to the climate change question is, it's always been something peripheral. Some people have taken it seriously in our industry, some haven't. Now that everybody got driven to work from home, besides the, you know, most people that had to work from home, you have these empty office spaces. What do you do with them? Can you make them palatable for the return? You know, what kind of renovation has to happen in there? And then when we talk about schools, all of a sudden schools started, you know, for those of us that have children, we started to hear the conversation about the HVAC systems in the schools that have never been addressed for 30 years, 20 years. And now it's like, well, how do we retrofit that greener? Is that going to be the thing that drives construction? You know what I mean? Like, besides the necessary construction, I don't know if I'm not saying this is the answer. It's just, but the retrofitting of buildings, because they are such huge energy hogs on this planet, right. 30 to 40% of the energy, right? It drives these big buildings, right? To maintain them, the HVAC. Is that going to change? I wonder, because it is a reset button, because people's behavior has changed, which means that
people care about has been reprioritized, I think, on a massive scale that we haven't seen in my lifetime.
Well.
Yeah. 100%.
You know, and are we going to be quick to forget? That's what I'm curious. Like, I mean, it has been traumatic, right? But the way our society can be sometimes, it's like one disaster to the other. You know, and I know we're talking about stuff that's not in construction, but I give you an example, like school shootings in the States. After a while, it's like, oh, there was another one. The impact always seemed to be a little less.
Yeah.
Becoming desensitized.
Crazy,
right?
because it's so horrific.
Yeah, right. So what happens here once those vaccines start going in everybody's arms? Do we forget what we've endured?
Until the next one.
Right? Until the next one, right? Like, it's an interesting time, and it's interesting to see where this industry goes, right? As far as heavy civil construction, like residential versus commercial, like what happens? And I guess we'll be there to cover it all. So that's the one thing.
Hell of an evolution.
Yeah. Yeah, in a very short period of time. So I don't know, as we wrap up kind of our in the end, you know, what did you think of this year in total? You know, like, it has been scary. I know I can speak from my point of view. It's been challenging for us as a newspaper that covers the industry. I'm not totally one of those people that's saying, man, I can't wait till 2020 is over, you know, kind of dismissing it, because I think it reminded us of the things that are important, you know. Like, I know maybe I'm being Mr. Glass half full now, but right, for as awful as it's been, and there have been some horrific deaths and healthcare systems brought to their knees, it's made us all value things a little differently, I would think. You know, we value our time with our family and friends more now because it's been taken away from us to a degree, right? So, but I don't know how it plays out in the industry. When's the next big conference? Does anybody know? And what is it? Is it virtual?
I bet you it is virtual, or it's a mix of the two for sure.
Well, I don't know. Are you going to be able to get people to cram into a, meeting center anytime soon? I'm not sure if you will be able to, even if there is a vaccine. I think people, I mean, I'm nervous. I don't know if I'd want to do that, even if, because I'm kind
Well,
of,
planes. Like
my behavior's
WestJet
changed.
keeps begging me for my business. I'm like, I'm not giving it to you, WestJet. It's not happening.
Yeah, Vince, you mentioned, what it means to us as we're a news entity. So, it's really impressed upon me, how it was kind of exciting for a while there. There's a real urgency, and every hour mattered. Like, there are thousands of people looking for answers, and we were there. We had to serve it up. We had to really work our networks and find out what the information was. Everybody was on the same side. Like, we got everybody's cell number, figuring out, okay, what went on this weekend, what's open today. So there was, the value of our industry is, in our publication, our website, in terms of, providing answers was proven pretty significantly this year, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Don. Especially coming in off of a year off, I was just kind of thinking to myself, all right, let's just, ease into things. Nope.
So much.
That's all right. I was very impressed with when I did come back to see the amount of content we were producing, but also just like hour by hour, like you said, it was really, really exciting. Unfortunately, it's because of a pandemic, but from a newsroom standpoint, we are journalists at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think that's the impressive thing. Like, I know I may have said it to a few of you maybe during some of the meetings, but the responsibility that this team was tasked with. So for our listeners or our viewers who are seeing this screen and our listeners listening to us, the responsibility was not lost on us. I'm not trying to be too heavy about it, but this is the news team of record as far as these two publications and this podcast that covered a pandemic exploding, erupting, and seeing it through. Like, we took that responsibility seriously. So I hope our listeners and our readers took that to heart. We tried our best day in and day out, you know what I mean, to keep everybody updated. I think this team did a fabulous job, not just because I lead them, I'm one of them. You know what I mean? And I'm really proud of all the work you guys did. You guys kept this industry informed with the latest and the best in information that we could gather. So kudos to all of you.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? It was a job well done. Really, it was. So with that, any parting thoughts other than happy holidays, Merry Christmas to everybody who observes it. And with that, I'll leave it to you guys to say goodbye. Go ahead, folks.
Wishing everybody all the best in the new year. Hopefully a better 2021 ahead of us, and bye-bye 2020.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hopefully we'll have some really, good content in the new year to share with you. Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Mhm.
Yeah,
All right.
we're making lots of good plans for the new year. Trust
Mhm.
us, the team is looking ahead, and more and better for the new year. So
Yeah.
see you around the bend.
Try to do new and interesting stuff, including this video right here. So, yeah, and then I reiterate what Lindsey said. Take a hike, 2020.
Angela, anything else to say?
Just thanks everyone for a great year, and looking forward to 2021. Happy New Year.
Okay, with that, listeners, stay safe and have a good holidays. Thank you, everyone.